Indonesia merupakan negara dengan ribuan pulau yang membentang dari Sabang sampai Merauke. Masyarakat yang tersebar dari berbagai macam suku, budaya, ras, dan agama memberikan warna yang majemuk dan multikultur bagi Ibu Pertiwi. Namun, kemajemukan ini ternyata tidak menjamin keselarasan dan keharmonisan bangsa. Faktanya, isu-isu keresahan masyarakat semakin lama semakin merajalela. Meningkatnya urbanisasi, padatnya arus lalu lintas sehingga kecelakaan sering terjadi. Limbah dan sampah berserakan di mana-mana. Kualitas pelayanan umum semakin menurun. Meningkatnya pengangguran, sulitnya pemerintah melakukan penataan ruang, ditambah pandemi COVID-19 yang semakin meluas, serta berbagai isu keresahan lain yang menyebabkan susah terciptanya integrasi sosial masyarakat Indonesia. Oleh karena itu, kami Pasca Sarjana ITB mempersembahkan Adiwidya 9 sebagai bentuk kepedulian terhadap krisisnya ide dan andil mahasiswa karena kurang meleknya mereka terhadap isu nasional dan permasalahan yang ada di Indonesia, serta minimnya semangat mahasiswa dalam mencetuskan gagasan serta solusi dari isu permasalahan di negara secara sistematis, metodologis, dan dapat dipertanggungjawabkan. Adiwidya 9 hadir dengan tema Smart City as an Alternative Solution for Development and Urban Equity in Indonesia merupakan serangkaian acara yang dikemas dalam bentuk talk show Smart Education, Smart Social Economy, dan Science Technology sebagai wadah guna menggali wawasan isu nasional dan solusinya, serta dalam bentuk webinar internasional sebagai sarana dalam mensinergikan peran mahasiswa dan menjaring solusi maupun gagasan penyelesaian permasalahan masyarakat guna mewujudkan pengembangan dan pemerataan kota di Indonesia. Sebagai kaum intelek muda, mahasiswa seharusnya lebih punya daya untuk memberikan gagasan serta solusi untuk menjadi bahan pertimbangan pemerintah dalam memutuskan suatu kebijakan. Untuk itu, kami manusia Allah ciptakan sebagai khalifah fil ardh untuk menjaga alam semesta. Kami hanya diperintahkan untuk bertawakal dan berikhtiar. Maka, inilah salah satu upaya kami dalam memberi solusi, mengutarakan gagasan pembangunan Smart City sebagai bentuk kepedulian kami terhadap negeri. Indonesia merupakan negara dengan ribuan pulau yang membentang dari Sabang sampai Merauke. Masyarakat yang tersebar dari berbagai macam suku, budaya, ras, dan agama memberikan warna yang majemuk dan multikultur bagi Ibu Pertiwi. Namun, kemajemukan ini ternyata tidak menjamin keselarasan dan keharmonisan bangsa. Faktanya, isu-isu keresahan masyarakat semakin lama semakin merajalela. Meningkatnya urbanisasi, padatnya arus lalu lintas sehingga kecelakaan sering terjadi. Limbah dan sampah berserakan di mana-mana. Kualitas pelayanan umum semakin menurun. Meningkatnya pengangguran, sulitnya pemerintah melakukan penataan ruang, Ditambah pandemi COVID-19 yang semakin meluas, serta berbagai isu keresahan lain yang menyebabkan susah terciptanya integrasi sosial masyarakat Indonesia. Oleh karena itu, Kamil Pasca Sarjana ITB mempersembahkan Adiwidya 9 sebagai bentuk kepedulian terhadap krisisnya ide dan andil mahasiswa karena kurang meleknya mereka terhadap isu nasional dan permasalahan yang ada di Indonesia, serta minimnya semangat mahasiswa dalam mencetuskan gagasan serta solusi dari isu permasalahan di negara secara sistematis, metodologis, dan dapat dipertanggungjawabkan. Adiwidya 9 hadir dengan tema Smart City as an Alternative Solution for Development and Urban Equity in Indonesia merupakan serangkaian acara yang dikemas dalam bentuk talk show Smart Education, Smart Social Economy, dan Science Technology sebagai wadah guna menggali wawasan isu nasional dan solusinya, serta dalam bentuk webinar internasional sebagai sarana dalam mensinergikan peran mahasiswa dan menjaring solusi maupun gagasan penyelesaian permasalahan masyarakat guna mewujudkan pengembangan dan pemerataan kota di Indonesia. Sebagai kaum intelek muda, mahasiswa seharusnya lebih punya daya untuk memberikan gagasan serta solusi untuk menjadi bahan pertimbangan pemerintah dalam memutuskan suatu kebijakan. Untuk itu, kami manusia Allah ciptakan sebagai khalifah fil ard untuk menjaga alam semesta. Kami hanya diperintahkan untuk bertawakal dan berikhtiar. Maka, inilah salah satu upaya kami dalam memberi solusi, mengutarakan gagasan pembangunan Smart City sebagai bentuk kepedulian kami terhadap negeri. Kamil Pasca Sarjana ITB mempersembahkan Profil Kepengurusan tahun 2021. Visi, Kamil menjadi rumah cendekia Muslim yang berakidah kuat dan berperan sebagai telaga maslahat bangsa. Misi, Kamil beriman. Kamil sebagai tempat belajar ilmu Islam dan sarana meningkatkan kualitas karakter Muslim. Kamil berkawan. Kamil tempat berbagi kebahagiaan, bekerja bersama seluruh civitas akademika, ITB, dan masyarakat. Kamil berperan. Kamil mengabdi untuk umat melalui aksi dan gagasan keilmuan sebagai langkah perbaikan bangsa.
Program Kamil yang terdiri dari
Recording in progress.
Kamil Pasca Sarjana ITB mempersembahkan Profil Kepengurusan tahun 2021. Visi, Kamil menjadi rumah cendekia Muslim yang berakidah kuat dan berperan sebagai telaga maslahat bangsa. Misi, Kamil beriman. Kamil sebagai tempat belajar ilmu Islam dan sarana meningkatkan kualitas karakter Muslim. Kamil berkawan. Kamil tempat berbagi kebahagiaan, bekerja bersama seluruh civitas akademika, ITB, dan masyarakat. Kamil berperan. Kamil mengabdi untuk umat melalui aksi dan gagasan keilmuan sebagai langkah perbaikan bangsa.
Program Kamil yang terdiri dari syiar Cinta Kamil, Kamil Mengajar, dan Adiwidya. Adakah dari kalian yang pernah mendengar beberapa program kegiatan dari Kamil ini? Nah, program ini tentunya tidak akan berjalan lancar tanpa kerjasama para anggota dari berbagai departemen yang ada di Kamil. Dan kira-kira apa aja sih departemen-departemennya? Yuk kita kenalan dengan pengurus dan departemen Kamil Pasca Sarjana ITB 2021.
1. BPH, Ketua Umum Badan Pengurus Harian BPH, Nugrah Asiragi. Sekretaris Umum, Imam Ghazaliye. Bendahara Umum, Vientini Safrilianti sebagai Bendum 1 dan Ririn Andriani sebagai Bendum 2. Departemen Pengembangan dan Penjagaan Sumber Daya Manusia PPSDM, Ketua Syahid Habibullah. Sekretaris Liza Jannatul Khulud. Departemen Syiar dan Pelayanan SDP, Kedua Au Arada Syukramuji. Sekretaris Suci Wulandari.
Departemen Akademik dan Keprofesian atau AKPRO dengan Ketua Wandiansyah. Dan Sekretaris Nadia Anggraini. Departemen Eksternal dengan Ketua Niko Rizaldi dan Sekretaris Putri Rahayu. Departemen Media dengan Ketua Alio Saputra dan Sekretaris Gita Sajidah.
Departemen Fundraising FR, Ketua Muhammad Ihsan Maulana. Sekretaris Ashilah Nurul Huda. Departemen Kemuslimahan, Ketua Novitasari. Sekretaris Nelly Sapitri.
Tahukah kamu, di Kamil sendiri ada 3 macam keanggotaan. Kalau kamu tertarik, kamu bisa ikut sebagai anggota, volunteer, atau APS. Kamu bisa bertemu dengan teman-teman lain dari lintas fakultas di ITB. Di Kamil, kamu bisa menambah koneksi jaringan pertemanan, upgrade skill, dan menyalurkan hobi seperti media, event organizer, akademik, kajian, dan masih banyak lagi yang tentunya semua didasarkan dan dilandaskan niat dakwah karena Allah. Sehingga harapannya apapun kegiatan yang kita lakukan di Kamil, selain bisa mendapatkan manfaat di dunia, juga harapan kebaikan pahala di akhirat. Agar kegiatan dan program Kamil berjalan lancar dan sesuai, Kamil Pasca Sarjana ITB juga memiliki pengawas dan pembina, yakni Kemahasiswaan ITB dan Yayasan Masjid Salman ITB. Masih bingung dan punya banyak pertanyaan?
Tenang, ada Kamil dan Kamila yang bisa bantu jawab pertanyaan kamu. Bisa melalui DM di IG resmi Kamil, @Kamil Pasca Sarjana ITB, atau sosial media lainnya.
For Excellencies, distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be upon us. For the Honorable Director of Institut Teknologi Bandung, represented by Professor Suwono, the Chairman of Kamil ITB, Doctor of Technology Muhammad Zuhri Catur Chandra STMT, our special invitees, Ustadz Muzammil Hasbullah and Ustadz Edwan Kadena PhD, and our keynote speakers for today, Professor Michael Batty from University College London, Professor Jiro Kokuryo from Keio University Japan, Professor Haryo Winarso from Institut Teknologi Bandung, and Dr. Haji Muhammad Ridwan Kamil, STMUD, the Governor of West Java Province, Indonesia, that will be represented by the head of West Java ICT Agency, Setiaji STMSI.
We would like to greet all distinguished guests, all the conference judges, all the reviewers, representative of Central and Region Mata Garuda, representative of HIMPAS and Executive Student Council from around Indonesia, and of course, all the participants. Before everything, let's open this great agenda by reciting Basmalah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let us introduce ourselves first. My name is Aleo.
And me, Kansa. It's such an honor for us to be your master of ceremony for today. Welcome to the 9th Adiwidya International Webinar. This event is held by Kamil of the Postgraduate Program, Institut Teknologi Bandung.
Well, first of all, praise to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. We have been graced by the chance together in this room. And thank you very much for your coming on the international webinar of the 9 Adiwidya.
Well, here's a little introduction. And here's a little introduction about 9 Adiwidya. Institut Teknologi Bandung was founded in 1920 and located in Bandung, West Java, Indonesia. ITB is second rank of Indonesia University Ranking 2022 by Times Higher Education, while Kamil Pasca Sarjana ITB is an Islamic organization of graduate students in Institut Teknologi Bandung. Adiwidya itself is the annual event of Kamil Pasca Sarjana ITB. The theme for this year is Smart City as an alternative solution for urban development and equity in Indonesia.
Before we start our agenda today, I'd like to explain the rules of the webinar session so we can go through the course conducively. And here are some rules. First one, participants should use registered name with the format name_institution. Secondly, participants should active their video with the filter background and dress properly. Participant may not turn off camera only if its connection is used. And the third, participants are expected to be active during webinar, as there will be interesting prizes in the end of the webinar. And the fourth, participants are not allowed to share any link from the webinar. And the fifth, participants should mute their microphone during webinar, except allowed by committee. And the sixth, participants could ask to the presenter during question section by using raise hand feature to talk directly or using chat box if any question before question section with the format name underscore institution underscore question. And next, participants should fill the attendance form and its evaluation as requirement to get the certificates. And link will be announced later. And the last one, participant will get 2 certificates if attend full of session 2 days.
And we also have the prize, and here are the rules. The first one, join the 9 Adiwidya International Webinar until the end of the session. And second, review this 9 Adiwidya International Webinar as creative as possible. Then, participants can start making reviews on Instagram in the middle of the session and upload a review on Instagram story, and then forget to mention us at Instagram at Adiwidya ITB. And then announcement of the lucky winners will be announced at the closing ceremony the next day. So good luck. And there are several notes.
Well, everyone, the next agenda is singing our national anthem, Indonesia Raya, together. For all of the audiences, please spirit.
Next, I'd like to invite our chairman of Kamil ITB 2021 to give a welcoming speech. For Doctor of Technology, Muhammad Zuri Catur Chandra, STMT, time is yours.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, already.
Okay, thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asrofil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Respected guests, especially our honorable Rector of Institut Teknologi Bandung, Professor Reni Wiradi Kusuma, and her representative, Professor Suwono Supangkat, Governor of West Java, Bapak Ridwan Kamil, and his representative, Mr. Setiaji from Diskominfo, distinguished keynote speakers, fellow students, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon, greeting to one and all. It gives me immense pleasure to grace all of your presence today in this special moment, the International Webinar and Conference of the 9th Adiwidya. Adiwidya is an annual academic and professional event, a series organized by Kamil Pascasarjana ITB. We all know that this year our society still needs to cope with challenges in this COVID-19 pandemic. However, although with such difficult circumstances, Kamil Alhamdulillah, has managed to organize this 9th Adiwidya as a very special event, because this event is the first time that we have an international, will have opportunities to sustain this international atmosphere and collaboration, and to conduct offline international Adiwidya events, inshallah. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last previous week, as part of the 9th Adiwidya, we have organized a series of talk shows with various topics related to smart societies, such as smart economy, education, and smart technologies. And today, international webinar and conference is the culmination of the 9th Adiwidya. In total, we have more than 400 participants in this 9th Adiwidya. And today, I would like to welcome you all in this special gathering, and I would like to take this pleasure opportunities to appreciate and to deliver my sincere gratitude to everyone who have made this Adiwidya event possible, especially to all distinguished speakers, Professor Michael Batty from University College London, Professor Jiro Kokuryo from Keio University Japan, Professor Haryo Winarso from Institut Teknologi Bandung, Indonesia, Mr. Setiaji from the Ministry of Health Indonesia, and also tomorrow we will have Professor Celestine Iwendi from University of Bolton, UK. And also our moderators, Dr. Ridwan Sutriyadi and Dr. Nur Rahman Wijaya. And of course, also our special invitees, Ustadz Edwan Kardana, PhD, and Brother Muzammil Hasbalah, who will inshallah start today's event with a beautiful recitation of the Quran. So I wish you all have a very special moment today with Adiwidya. And I wish this Adiwidya provides many benefits to all of us by increasing our knowledge and our wisdom. And this event would have been impossible without the support of each and everyone present here, and especially for the committee. I would like to thank you all. So welcome and enjoy today's event. Thank you, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mr. Chatur, for a coming speech. And next, we invite Prof. Suhono, the representative of Institut Teknologi Bandung Rector, to officially open this event and give the opening remark. Time is yours, Prof. Suhono.
I think he was just disconnected.
While waiting for Prof. Suhono to be on air, we have several agenda for today. I'd like to describe all the activities in scale. We have Prof. Michael Batty from University College London, and then we have Prof. Jiro Kokuryo from Keio University Japan. We have Prof. Winarso from Institut Teknologi Bandung, and we have Dr. Haji Muhammad Ridwan Kamil, STMPD, the Governor of the State of Province in Indonesia, that will be represented by the Head of the Java ICT Agency, Mr. Setiaji, ST, M.Si. And don't forget, we also have the theme for this year is Smart City as an alternative solution for urban development and equity in Indonesia. Is Prof. Suhono ready? Oh, I think he has some connection issue. Okay.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Excellencies, distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I would like to convey apologies from Rector of IDB, Professor Reni Wirahadikusuma. She asked me as a head of Smart City and Community Innovation Center of IDB, Suhonwarso Supangkat, to give speech in this morning. For the Honorable the Chairman of Kamil of ITB, Dr. Muhammad Yuri Chandra, our special invitees, Ustadz Muzamil Hasbullah, and Ustadz Edwan Cardena PC, my close friend. Our keynote speaker for today, Professor Michael Batty from University College London, Professor Jiro Kokuryo from Keio Daigaku, Ohayo gozaimasu, Professor Haryo Winarso, my senior from ITB, and Pak Ridwan Kamil, the Governor of West Java Province, Indonesia. We would like to greet all of the distinguished guests, all the conference judges, all the reviewers, representative of Central and Region Mata Garuda, representative of HIMPAS and Executive Student Council from around Indonesia, and of course, all of the participants. Welcome to 9th Adiwidya International Webinar. This event is held by Kamil of the Postgraduate Program, Institut Teknologi Bandung. This webinar will talk about smart city. I hope this international webinar capable to create interactive forum for the community, especially students, to discuss with the right expert regarding the implementation of smart cities as an alternative solution for the development and equity of cities in Indonesia are informative and helpful. Last, I would like to apologize if there is any mistake I have made for today. Thank you for your attention and attendance. Good luck and enjoy this event. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for Professor Suhono for opening this event and for the opening remarks. Well, the next agenda is Reciting Al Quran. This session will be led by Ustadz Muzamil Hasbullah. Ustadz Muzamil Hasdullah is a Hafiz and Al-Quran reciter from Nangro Aceh Darussalam and alumni of ITB. For Ustadz Muzamil Hasdullah, is he already available? All right, time is yours.
Well, everyone, our Ustadz Muzamil Hasbullah is not ready for sure. So we would like to invite our brother, How Arada, Uji Syukuran. Time is yours for reciting Holy Quran.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار ربنا إنك من تدخل النار فقد أخزيته وما للظالمين من أنصار ربنا إننا سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد صدق الله العظيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Well, thank you, Brother Aad, for beautiful tilawah. Well, finally, we almost arrived at the webinar session. But before we start, I'd like to invite all the participants and excellencies to open your camera because we will have a photo session.
I think the committees can help to spotlight all the excellencies and distinguished guests because we will have a photo session after this. Okay, it's okay, Mr. Nugraha. Still have a conversation after this. And we have already Prof. Jiro Kokuryo on our room. I want to greet him first. Hello, Prof. Jiro, are you there? Okay, I think he's not available yet for this session, so we just start the photo session already. Okay, we have several slides, so I'll start from slide 1. 1, 2, 3. Okay, on the second slide, out of 11, 1, 2, and 3. The third slide, 1, 2, and 3. Fourth slide, 1, 2, and 3. Fifth slide, 1, 2, and 3. Sixth slide, 1, 2, and 3. Seventh slide, 1, 2, and 3. Eighth slide, 1, 2, and 3. The ninth slide, 1, 2, and 3. 10th slide, 1, 2, and 3. And the last slide, 11, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, thank you for all the participants to open your camera. And then we're going to move to the next agenda. Oh, after that we have a break for 5 minutes. So thank you, everyone. We will have this webinar again session in 5 minutes later. So thank you and see you in 5 minutes.
Well, everyone, let me remind you first that for all the participants, you should use your registered name with the format name_institution.
Indonesia merupakan negara dengan ribuan pulau yang membentang dari Sabang sampai Merauke. Masyarakat yang tersebar dari berbagai macam suku, budaya, ras, dan agama memberikan warna yang majemuk dan multikultur bagi Ibu Pertiwi. Namun, kemajemukan ini ternyata tidak menjamin keselarasan dan keharmonisan bangsa. Faktanya, isu-isu keresahan masyarakat semakin lama semakin merajalela. Meningkatnya urbanisasi, padatnya arus lalu lintas sehingga kecelakaan sering terjadi. Limbah dan sampah berserakan di mana-mana. Kualitas pelayanan umum semakin menurun. Meningkatnya pengangguran, sulitnya pemerintah melakukan penataan ruang, ditambah pandemi COVID-19 yang semakin meluas, serta berbagai isu keresahan lain yang menyebabkan susah terciptanya integrasi sosial masyarakat Indonesia. Oleh karena itu, Kamil Pasca Sarjana ITB mempersembahkan Adiwidya 9 sebagai bentuk kepedulian terhadap krisisnya ide dan andil mahasiswa karena kurang meleknya mereka terhadap isu nasional dan permasalahan yang ada di Indonesia, serta minimnya semangat mahasiswa dalam mencetuskan gagasan serta solusi dari isu permasalahan di negara secara sistematis, metodologis, dan dapat dipertanggungjawabkan. Adiwidya 9 hadir dengan tema Smart City as an Alternative Solution for Development and Urban Equity in Indonesia merupakan serangkaian acara yang dikemas dalam bentuk talk show Smart Education, Smart Social Economy, dan Science Technology sebagai wadah guna menggali wawasan isu nasional dan solusinya, serta dalam bentuk webinar internasional sebagai sarana dalam mensinergikan peran mahasiswa dan menjaring solusi maupun gagasan penyelesaian permasalahan masyarakat guna mewujudkan pengembangan dan pemerataan kota di Indonesia. Sebagai kaum intelek muda, mahasiswa seharusnya lebih punya daya untuk memberikan gagasan suatu kebijakan. Untuk itu, kami manusia Allah ciptakan sebagai khalifah fil ardh untuk menjaga alam semesta. Kami hanya diperintahkan untuk bertawakal dan berikhtiar. Maka, inilah salah satu upaya kami dalam memberi solusi, mengutarakan gagasan pembangunan Smart City sebagai bentuk kepedulian kami terhadap negeri.
Well, everyone, our next agenda is a speech from our Ustad Edwin Cardena, PhD. He is a lecturer and also a dean of the Faculty of Civil and Environmental in ITB. Well, sir, time is yours.
Hello, sir. Are you there?
Yes, I'm really sorry. I just prepared myself.
Okay, thank
I just
you.
finished graduation day just across the street from the Aula Barat, West Hall, to my faculty, Civil and Environment Engineering. So I need a little bit time. I'm sorry for that. So Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wa bihi nasta'in wa ala umuri dunya waddin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. If you allow me to share the screen. Can I share the screen? I would like to show some slide, please. Thank you very much. Okay, so the title that I would like to share with you is Human Awareness and Responsibility in Protecting the Environment. This is a topic that given to me by the organizing committee. By this, I would like to start by saying that our environmental is very fragile. Despite the saying of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala in the Holy Qurans, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ قَالُوا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُصْلِحُونَ. Well, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala say orders us to be the Khalifa and then to make peace, not to destroy our environments. But we can see that our environment is very fragile. Deforestation, for example, and then pollutant by human activities, industries are the cause of the environmental degradation. So meaning that by a little inventions, unwise invention by man, our environments could be destroyed. Lands, soils, waters, as well as air, waters, as well as the land or soil. Yeah? And then we can see here that number of humans is growing. At the moment, I think in the world there are approaching 9 billion of people, and we can see how natures are changing. Yeah, from nothing to big cities, from very clean river to polluted rivers, if we do not wise utilizing our environments. So this is what happens in our earth. Now, what is the environmental awareness? Once information or literature mention that the growth environmental awareness is the growth and development of awareness, understanding, consciousness toward biophysical environments and its problems, including human interaction and effect. So basically, environmental awareness is how people thinking ecologically, or people behave just like ecological consciousness. So that's what's basically the environmental awareness. So the growth and development of awareness, understanding, consciousness toward biophysical environments and its problem, including human interaction and effect. Now, in Indian context, the growing concerns, I think, starting at the beginning of the 1980, when the Constitution on Environment was first released. Yeah, number 4, 1982. I think before that, before 80s, we actually did not really concern or give a big intention or intention to our environment. Yeah, and at that time, if you look at the literatures or news, old news, there was a clean river program. Yeah. So these waters, because waters can be easily looked if they are polluted. Yeah. So beginning in 1990s, Indonesian people's government started to also concern on the air pollution. So many many regulations concerning air pollution released in the early 90s. And the government at the time also had a blue sky program. Yeah, hazardous waste issues just started late 1990. Regulation on how the management of hazardous waste in Indonesia was released in 1998. And now it's changing, updating, and it's very good regulation nowadays, yeah? But not land contamination or land pollution until the year of 2000, yeah? So we can see here the growing awareness of Indonesian governments, Indonesian people toward environments. It's not only in waters, air, but also in soil, in land. Yeah. Now, I would like to give you some examples. Yeah. This is maybe a little bit related to the topic of the webinars that you are now attending. Development and urban equity. Example of the access to clean water. Yeah. Indonesia at the moment, I think we have more or less 80% people access to clean water. Yeah, but they are divided into two systems, piping systems and non-piping system. In rural, I think mostly the access of clean waters through the non-piping system. But in Jakarta, for example, in 2018, 60% of the access to clean water has been in piping system. Yeah, but the problem in the cities and the big cities, there is some kind of unfairness. Like for example, poor people, they tend to pay more for water, for clean water. Why? Because they get water from non-piping systems, which is more expensive. Yeah. While, you know, the rich people, they can enjoy water through piping, which is less in terms of the cost. So I think the question is how the smart water supply for cities need also to include fairness. Why? Because the groundwater is limited, surface water is getting polluted, meaning that the cost of treatment is increasing. That is the quality. That is from the point of view of the quantity. From the point of view of quality, we are now dealing with anthropogenic pollutants, mainly are man-made chemicals. They are a threat in tap waters, in city tap waters. Even you have smart city, for example, but how can we avoid the threat in the tap water? What is a threat in tap waters? I can tell you, we are using now high number type of chemicals. Yeah, lots of chemical we use it in our industries, in our domestic uses, and even in households we use chemicals. Yeah, but only limited numbers of those chemicals are being regulated, and even much smaller, ready for analysis in our lab, meaning that in our water supplies treatment plant, for example, we cannot measure, we cannot detect all chemicals in the water. So there is great possibilities of anthropogenic pollutants, unknown anthropogenic pollutants that is missing in our detection, even in our lab, even in our regulations. So that is what I mean with the threat of the tap in the tap waters. Yeah. So now I think with that, the Quran is teaching us to respect nature, and that is mentioned in the Al-Anbiya verse 107. Wa ma arsalnaka illa rahmatan lil alamin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that he didn't, order Muhammad the Rasul, yeah, to make, destruction, but it's a mercy to the world. And that is also meaning that we have to respect nature. not to disrespect of the nature. Teach us to have a kind of moral responsibility for nature. Yeah, that is mentioned in the Al-Baqarah, verse 30. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً قَالُوا أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَن يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ قَالَ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. When Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala mentioned to the angels that God would like to make man as a Khalifa in the earth, and they said, do you would like to make this man which going to destroy the nature, while we are all always tasbih upon you? And that is what the angels respond at the time. But Allah said, you do not know what you do not see. Yeah. So there is actually in this ayah contain the message that we should have a kind of moral responsibility for nature. Yeah. And the third ayah that I would like to share with you is the Al-Hujurat 11, which also contain the message of we should be caring for nature. Yeah, we should help each other. We should keep our nature, not destroy it. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la yaskhar qaumun min qaumin asa ayyakunu khairum minhum wala nisa'u min nisa'i asa ayyakunna khairan minhum wala talmizu anfusakum wala tanabazu bil alqab bi'sal ismul fusuqu ba'dal iman wa man lam yatub fa ulaika humul zalimun. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, let not a group of you scoff of another group. It may well be that the latter at whom they scoff are better than they. Nor let a group of women scoff of at another group. It may well be that the latter are better than they. And do not count one another, nor revile one another by nicknames. It is an evil thing that gain notoriety for ungodliness after belief. Those who do not repent are indeed the wrongdoers. So in this ayat, actually, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, we should help each other, we should care each other, not only man to man, but also to our nature. So I think this actually our religious teaching to us as mankind to have a kind of awareness on environment as well as a moral responsibility to protect our nature. So hopefully by the developments, by making the city smarter, we can do our developments not just like the pictures in my left-hand side, yeah, which is destroy after development, but it should be just like the pictures on my right-hand side, where developments can be still going on, and the nature can be still protected. I think that's all my speech this afternoon. I hope this is what just be expected by the participant and also by organizing committee. I stop sharing and I would like to thank you for your kind attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Ustadz Edwan Karina, PhD, for your speech. And now, after the speech, we're going to have a conversation with Ustadz Edwan Karina and with Mr. Catur Chandra. For the committees, can you spotlight us, please, for the photo session? And Mr. Catur also, okay, he has the video, okay. Okay, sir, we have a photo session first. Ready, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, thank you, Mr. Catur and Mr. Edwan Karina for the speech.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Stay healthy all. Thank you. Okay, after this, we're gonna enter the webinar session, but before, we're gonna remind you that we have the prizes and we also have rules. The first one, for the participants, thank you to attend this event, and you should use your username with format name _ institution. And don't forget to fill the attendance form and evaluation that will be announced later at the end in this event. And after this, we're going to have a webinar session from the speakers. The first one from Prof. Michael Batty from University College London. Second one is Prof. Jiro Kokuryo from Keio University, Japan. The third one is Prof. Haryo Winarso from Institut Teknologi Bandung. And the fourth one is Dr. Haji Muhammad Ridwan Kamil, STM UD, the Governor of West Java Province, Indonesia, that will be represented by the head of West Java ICT Agency, Mr. Setiaji, ST, M.Si. Is the webinar session ready for all the committees? All right, after this, we're going to have a break session first. So we're going to see you in 10. Well, thank you and see you in 5 minutes.
Indonesia merupakan negara dengan ribuan pulau yang membentang dari Sabang sampai Merauke. Masyarakat yang tersebar dari berbagai macam suku, budaya, ras, dan agama memberikan warna yang majemuk dan multikultur bagi Ibu Pertiwi. Namun, kemajemukan ini ternyata tidak menjamin keselarasan dan keharmonisan bangsa. Faktanya, isu-isu keresahan masyarakat semakin lama semakin merajalela. Meningkatnya urbanisasi, padatnya arus lalu lintas sehingga kecelakaan sering terjadi. Limbah dan sampah berserakan di mana-mana. Kualitas pelayanan umum semakin menurun. Meningkatnya pengangguran, sulitnya pemerintah melakukan penataan ruang, ditambah pandemi COVID-19 yang semakin meluas, serta berbagai isu keresahan lain yang menyebabkan susah terciptanya integrasi sosial masyarakat Indonesia. Oleh karena itu, Kamil Pasca Sarjana ITB mempersembahkan Adiwidya 9 sebagai bentuk kepedulian terhadap krisisnya ide dan andil mahasiswa karena kurang meleknya mereka terhadap isu nasional dan permasalahan yang ada di Indonesia, serta minimnya semangat mahasiswa dalam mencetuskan gagasan serta solusi dari isu permasalahan di negara secara sistematis, metodologis, dan dapat dipertanggungjawabkan. Adiwidya 9 hadir dengan tema Smart City as an Alternative Solution for Development and Urban Equity in Indonesia merupakan serangkaian acara yang dikemas dalam bentuk talk show Smart Education, Smart Social Economy, dan Science Technology sebagai wadah guna menggali wawasan isu nasional dan solusinya, serta dalam bentuk webinar internasional sebagai sarana dalam mensinergikan peran mahasiswa dan menjaring solusi maupun gagasan penyelesaian permasalahan masyarakat guna mewujudkan pengembangan dan pemerataan kota di Indonesia. Sebagai kaum intelek muda, mahasiswa seharusnya lebih punya daya untuk memberikan gagasan serta solusi untuk menjadi bahan pertimbangan pemerintah dalam memutuskan suatu kebijakan. Untuk itu, kami manusia Allah ciptakan sebagai khalifah fil ardh untuk menjaga alam semesta. Kami hanya diperintahkan untuk bertawakal dan berikhtiar. Maka, inilah salah satu upaya kami dalam memberi solusi, mengutarakan gagasan pembangunan Smart City sebagai bentuk kepedulian kami terhadap negeri.
Hi everyone, welcome back again to the 9th Adiwidya International Webinar, Smart City as an Alternative Solution for Urban Development and Equity in Indonesia. So I'd like to tell you such a reminder that we also have the prizes for selected participants and how to get the prize. First, you can upload an interesting Insta story on Instagram about the Adiwidya 9th International Webinar, then tag our Instagram account at Adiwidya ITB, and it's required. And then there are also the prizes for selected questions. So good luck. Okay, now we are entering the main event, which is the webinar session. But before we start, I'd like to greet all our moderator and our speakers in this room. And this session will be guided by our moderator, Mr. Ridwan Sutriadi, STMT, PhD. Beside Mr. Ridwan, we also have our speakers already in this room. Let me greet all the speakers first. Good afternoon from Indonesia, Prof. Michael Batty from University College London, Prof. Jiro Kokuryo from Keio University, Japan, Prof. Haryo Winarso from Institut Teknologi Bandung, and Mr. Setiaji, M.Si.
Well, because our moderator and all speakers are here with us, we like to invite all of the participants to open the camera, and also the moderator and also speaker to open the camera to have a photo session together. Please, for the committee, to spotlight the speakers and also the moderator.
All right, while waiting for the speakers and all the moderators, I would like to remind you that along the webinar, we have to mute your audio so the webinar will go through conducively. And don't forget to use your virtual background. And also follow the rules of all the that we have already tell in the beginning. And don't forget also that we have the prizes, so you should join the prizes. And for the participants, you should activate the video and use the virtual background.
And also do not forget that we have a lot of door prize. So we are waiting for you to mention us on our Instagram and to tag us.
And the webinar is not only one day, Kang Aleo, and we have also the webinar for tomorrow. And our speakers for tomorrow is Prof. Celestine Iwendi from University of Bolton, United Kingdom. And still, the theme is Smart City as an alternative solution for development and urban equity in Indonesia. So if you have already registered this webinar, don't forget to join the second day for tomorrow.
Also, the second day is a big day for the participant because they will have a conference and we'll meet the juries over there. So we will choose the best paper and also best presenter for tomorrow.
Yes, so in the morning session, we'll start with conference session. And then the afternoon session, we will have an international webinar, and the theme is how to make a good paper. So if you're interested, yes, so if you're interested to make a good paper, so you should join the tomorrow's webinar.
You should join tomorrow.
Yeah, this conference is open for everyone for free.
And also to get a certificate, you should join for 2 days. That is a requirement, right?
Yes, this is true. Okay, now we have the speakers and all the moderators here already. Good afternoon from Indonesia, Prof. Jiro and Prof. Michael Batty. And our moderator for today, Mr. Ridwan. How are you?
Good. Very fine Saturday.
All right. And our second moderator for the second session, Mr. Rahman. How are you, sir?
Yes, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, now since we have all the moderators and speakers here, we would like to have a photo session. So for the operator, can be ready. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, thank you, all the moderator and speakers. Okay, before the moderator takes the session, let me introduce Mr. Ridwan first. Mr. Ridwan Sutriadi, STMT, PhD, is an associate professor and lecturer in urban regional planning at Institut Teknologi Bandung. He is involved in urban planning and design group and contributed to research and social service, also innovation for ITB campus in Cirebon. His dissertation talks much about the role of technology for urban planning and writing books about smart cities after war. That research being carried out includes studies on innovation in regional development responding to pandemics as efforts to enrich the annual regional development planning, and also smart cities in the new normal era, encouraging competitive regional identity, and so on, of course. Mr. Ridwan also has so many awards, such as Karya Satya Award for 10 years of service as a civil servant, as a teaching staff at the Bandung Institute of Technology in 2013. Also, Regional Development Planning Award from Bappenas as an independent assessment team during the Regional Development Planning Award assessment process of Bappenas. And also, Mr. Ridwan has awards for innovation work at the peak of the ITB anniversary event in Sabta. That's a lot of experience you have, Mr. Ridwan. That's very delightful and amazing. Okay, for Mr. Ridwan, are you ready to take this session?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, time is yours.
Ms. Hansa, dear Excellencies, distinguished speakers, Professor Michael Batty and Professor Jiro from Keio, guests and all the participants, welcome to the 9th webinar, international webinar, which is held by Kamil Pascasarjana ITB, Adiwidya 9. So on this occasion, allow me to welcome all invitees, especially the distinguished honorable speakers. The first one is Professor Michael Batty from University College London, and then the second one is Professor Jiro Kokuryo from Keio University, Japan. And firstly, I would like to read in general about the curriculum vitae of Professor Michael Batty. He's an expert on urban planning in United Kingdom, Geography, Bartlett University College London, UCL, director of the Center of Advanced Spatial Analysis, or known as CASA, chair of the Center of Advanced Spatial Analysis at UCL. And also, it is a very pleasure for me to be as a moderator, since our department, where I work, Department of Urban and Regional Planning, for a long time during 80s, it was supported by University College London, especially in developing its master degree program. So welcome, Professor Michael Batty. It's nice to have you here. And then the first, we'll go on to the next presenter, the distinguished guest, Professor Jiro Kokuryo, Keio University, Japan. I still remember that two of my classmates still there as the lecturer, as the professor there in electronic, if I'm not mistaken. And Professor Jiro Kokuryo is a professor at the Faculty of Policy Management, Keio University, Japan, Executive Director of the Keio Research Institute at SFC 2005 to 2009, School of, I forgot the Dean of the Faculty of Policy Management 2009 to 2013, and Vice President for International Collaboration and Education from 2013 to 2021. So for the first turn, I would like to give the opportunity, time and place for Professor Michael Batty to give a presentation for 30 minutes. Please, time is yours, Professor Michael Batty.
Thank you very much, Ridwan. Let me begin by sharing my screen. Okay, this will take a minute. Okay, so, okay. Reload my PowerPoint. Okay, I hope everybody is able to see that. Please interrupt me if there are any problems in terms of the presentation. I'm going to spend about 30 minutes, about half an hour, talking about smart cities, big data, and urban development. Now, as you all know, this is a very large subject that, to some extent, everything we do in cities is being affected by information technology and computing. And all I will do this morning by my time, but I know it's the afternoon in Indonesia. But what I'll be doing this afternoon is really talking about some of the examples that we've been working with in our center, which give you an indication of how we're using information technologies, computers and communications to be able to improve, if you like, ultimately the sustainability, the efficiency, and of course the equity with respect to cities. So I'll talk about smart cities a little bit to begin with, and then big data, and then urban development. So let me just go on and let me just move a few of these things out of the way on my screen. Okay, so this is what I'm going to talk about: smart cities, big data, and urban analytics. I'm going to talk a little bit about what a smart city is, and then I'm going to talk about what we call real-time streaming. One of the kind of features of smart cities is that increasingly we're embedding computers and sensors into the city, and we're capturing information. We're capturing information about how people move. We're capturing about information about how they interact with one another. We're capturing information about how the city is working in terms of the way water is distributed, utilities and so on, all in fact using digital means. And from this data, which we have in real time, by real time I mean it's continuous in the sense that we're capturing it every second and every microsecond, then essentially we'll be able to make sense of the city in a way that we've not been able to make sense of it before in that sense. So it's giving us an opportunity to actually increase our understanding of cities. I'll talk a little bit about real-time streaming, show you a couple of examples of dashboards, which we have in London, and then I'll talk really about three things. I'll talk about intelligent transit. I'll mainly be talking about how we are automating transit, basically, in this sense, and the data that comes from that. And in particular, I'll talk about some of the things we can actually do with this data, which is looking at variabilities, disruptions, basically. And I'll be taking the London Tube as the example, the London subway system, showing you how some of this data enables us to think about improving the system and avoiding disruptions. And then I'll talk about real-time data in terms of social media. I'll show you some examples of that. And then last but not least, I'll talk a little bit about automation in the city, the long-term future. Everybody is talking about electric cars, they're talking about autonomous vehicles in this sense. We're talking about how we can develop many of the objects which we take for granted in cities in an automated way. Well, of course, automation has been going on for the last 200 or more years since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And this, to some extent, can be seen as increasing automation using digital technologies in that sense, which are improving our operation of functions in the city. Okay, so let me move on. And my first diagram, in fact, let me just go back. My first diagram, in fact, makes a distinction between, on the one hand, what I call the real built environment, which is the city itself. That's the city, and I'm using the word city to cover all sorts of settlements here. We're talking about urban and regional in that sense, city and countryside. But we're talking about an urban world, basically. So the thing out there that we're interested in is called the city. And we make a distinction in planning, of course, and many other professional areas that are looking at the city, between the real city out there and then our ideas about the city. And we hope that our ideas about the city get really as close as possible. And this circular diagram, this diagram that shows you how the real city relates to our ideas and how our ideas relate to the real city. This is the way we've thought about cities for a long time. We've certainly thought about cities for the last couple of 100 years in this particular way. And generally speaking, our ideas have been soft ideas. They've been descriptions of cities. There's been a little bit of analysis, but not very much. And only when computers were invented in the middle of the last century did we really begin to think, well, maybe we can actually automate, maybe we can actually model our cities in this sense, that we can take data and we can build computer models of these things. So in some senses, this has been going on since the beginning of the development of the computer. The first computer models were built in the 1950s in transportation in the United States, and then in the UK in the 1960s and 70s. And then there's been a rapid dissemination everywhere. But what's really happened, which makes the distinction between the traditional city and the smart city, is that computers and sensors have actually entered this picture. In this particular context, we can see that computers, whoops, I'm sorry, just clicked on that. Computers and sensors have actually entered the picture. So previous to that, this was the picture. And then really starting about 20 years ago, I suppose, or even a little bit before then, computers and sensors have entered the picture. And once we can embed computers, actually put the computers into the city, which we're actually trying to understand, maybe using those same computers, basically, then we get data which is captured in real time. So out of this picture comes real-time data in that sense. And you can see the real-time stream data. So these two particular things are really characterize the difference between the traditional ideas about our cities, traditional ideas about planning, and the way computers are being input into this context, and they're generating real-time data. One of my examples will be how computers and sensors are entering our transit system. So the London subway system, for example, nobody pays with real money anymore. We use smart cards of various sorts called the Oyster Card. In fact, in Britain, we'll see that. And that generates the data, basically. That tells us where passengers are entering the system, what they're paying, where they're going to, and so on. And from this, we can get big data. It's big data because it's streamed in real time. The tube was automated round about 15 years ago. And since then, we have a stream of data. Everybody who has used the system has been captured, basically, because they're using these smart cards. Okay, so that's our picture. That's what we're talking about this afternoon, how computers and sensors and real-time stream data have actually entered the city in that sense. Let me move on and complete the loop. Information and control is what we've got here, and then information exhaust. So data is flowing around this particular circular loop, basically. Our ideas about the city are improved using models, basically. Those are put into the city. The city is generating data, which in turn is used to improve our models in this particular context. Let me introduce into this picture routine models and strategic models. We'll talk a little bit about these basically in a sense. And this is introduced into our picture. Let me have a quick look and see in that sense. All of this material in terms of models really relates to what we would loosely call analytics. The term urban analytics or urban informatics basically is the term used for all of these tools and techniques. Also before the smart city, as well as within the smart city, basically, but they're computer-based tools and techniques which enable us to make sense of all of this data in that sense. Okay, so let me just summarize this. We've got information, which we normally capture, and increasingly we're capturing information about the city using mobile and fixed devices, such as smartphones, smart cards, and so on. This whole thing really complements what's going on in the city. It doesn't substitute for our previous understanding. It normally complements our understanding in that sense. So it's adding to the information and understanding that we've actually got about the city and our ability to actually plan it, because of course we can introduce changes in automation basically as part of our plan making, part of our master planning in that sense. And this has also introduced time into our thinking. Go back 20, 30, 40 years, and most planning was pretty timeless. We produced a master plan, which might pertain to a long time horizon. To implement the plan might take many years in that sense. But of course, the real-time city is the real-time city not over 1 year or 10 years or even several decades, basically, but the real-time city is about what's happening in the next couple of minutes, basically, what's happening in the next 30 seconds, what's happening in the next 5 minutes, you know, the next 5 hours and the next 5 days. So that's the real-time city. And that's introduced time into our thinking in this particular context. Okay, so in other words, we can sometimes think of this as the 24-hour city, basically, in that sense. And generally speaking, these sensors which are being introduced, and I should say that many of the sensors are now mobile, in the sense that best sensor of all, of course, is our smartphone. There must be many people watching me this afternoon from Indonesia have their smartphones on one side. In fact, very rarely do I do anything on the computer these days without having my smartphone at my side, because a lot of the information that relates to what I'm doing in computing is actually put to the smartphone, passwords, codes, and things of that sort, of course. In that sense. So in other words, we're working with more than one computer at any one point in time. But basically, our smartphones really are the way that we're increasingly capturing information about the city. A lot of data, of course, is captured by computers which are actually physically embedded into the system itself. So, for example, the Oyster Card payment system in London on the London Tube, which is used by scanning a smart card or a credit card or a smartphone information into the system. That's a fixed system, which is a mobile device basically, but the actual system itself is fixed. The points where the data is actually captured are fixed in that sense. So we have both mobile and immobile or static sensors in this particular context. Now, here are some examples, basically. This is very typical of the kind of data in a routine sense that is available. This is a London dashboard. This is from about 10 years ago, basically. But if you look around that particular picture, what you can actually see is a whole variety of data that is being streamed in real time. If I had the dashboard for real, and I will show you something for real in a moment, I hope. If you have the dashboard for real, then you'd see these numbers changing. You can also see things like the FTSE 100 and the Dow Jones Industrial Average, in other words, fintech. You can see the status of the tube. You can see one or two webcams in that sense. A variety of information being piped into the dashboard in lots of places at the moment. Here's actually a wall where we've taken each of those things in those and put some iPads onto a wall, basically, so you can actually see what that data is. Now, the next example, I think, is effectively, and let's see if we can actually show this, basically, in a sense. I'm going to try and launch it, basically. But this is actually a series of webcams around the city in that sense. So let me click onto this in that sense. Let me just go back again. And whoops, we're getting a little bit out of order. Let me see if I can click. Yeah, there we are. Let me see if I can click this link. Okay, now I don't know what you're actually seeing here, but hopefully you're going to see central London. So you can indeed, this is the London Panopticon. There are basically 9 cameras stuck around London. At this point, I can change the location in that sense. So let me just go on to here. And actually I'm not going to change the location, basically, but I can actually pan around on this little map here. Basically, you can see me zooming in and so on. I can zoom in and I can change my viewpoint in a sense. What we're looking at here is actually it's the area very close to where I live in the city of London, basically. And you can actually see it's early morning on a Saturday. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning, something of that sort. You can actually see the traffic on the road. Not much traffic, basically, at that point. We're still pretty much in the midst of a pandemic, and it is indeed a weekend, so it's going to be quite light at that sense. So this is very typical of the kind of real-time stream data that I'm talking about. Now, let me get out of that and see if we can get back. Yes, we're back. Okay, back onto the PowerPoint. This is always a bit difficult. If I launch a website in the middle of a PowerPoint on something like Zoom, basically, one never knows what's going to happen. I've had a few disasters, in a sense, when the systems have been a little bit different, but we're okay this morning, so I can actually show some of these things. Okay, now there's lots of things that we can do with this data. The other major feature of the smart city is visualization. You've already seen visualization. We're building several 3D models of London, for example. We've been doing it for about 10 or 15 years, basically, and we're adding data to the 3D model. So, for example, you can see that this is a block model, basically, in that sense. I'm sorry, my PowerPoint keeps flipping in that sense, but the block model basically is showing you here, and I can actually show you a movie. We've made a movie of this 3D model. We have the model covering most of London, 3 or 4 million buildings, basically, or building blocks. We're not rendering the model in detail. It's not really an architect's model as such. It's a 3D model that we can actually fly through virtual London. And we're tying blocks basically to land use and activities. So if you like, you can think of it as a 3D information system, a 3D database. So let's have a look and see whether my movie will launch at this particular point. So let's have a quick look at the movie. Yeah, so off we go, basically. So this is actually a capture. It's about 3 minutes long. I'm going to skip it in a moment. We're flying along the Thames at the moment, and as you can see, the blocks aren't rendered, but they are 1 or 2 landmarks. We just passed the Tower Bridge, basically. We're heading towards the Olympic site in East London. In 2012, we're at the Olympic site. That's the centre, and then we're into the Westfield Shopping Centre at that point, and we're scanning around the Olympic Park. And as you can see, this is a very crude visual representation, but it's particularly useful at identifying land use and locations in this particular context. Of course, we can do everything with this sort of stuff. We can actually put in new buildings and look at the impact, but we've also got real-time information here. We've got real-time tube lines, and we can link all of this stuff to what's actually happening out there now. Those cameras that I showed you in central London, basically, we could actually link this sort of fly-through model to those cameras so that we had coordination in this sense. Now, there's a great deal of this sort of material involved in the smart city, but let's move on, because I want to move on to these questions of transit, basically. So I'm going to be looking at intelligent transit, how we can automate the transport system in that sense. And as I've said to you, we have something called originally an Oyster Card, basically, which was a smart card that you could buy and top up with money, basically, so that you could use the tube. You just simply tap the smart card. I think the actual next picture actually shows you that. Yeah, okay. So as you can see, this is the Oyster Card. Now, the Oyster Card is not used much now because most people have this media on their phones. Or even you can use your credit card, basically. There's lots of different ways of paying, but you can actually see how people sense it. We have the fixed sensor, which is everywhere in the tube stations, and then we have the mobile device, which in this case is either the smart card or the smartphone, basically, at that point, or indeed somebody, you can see a little picture there, somebody with an Apple Watch or something like that. With the data on their watch. Now, we've got several data sets, basically. We've got a very big data set of about a billion records, basically, over the summer of 2012. This is about 6 million people traveling every day, basically, on the tube system over a period of 3 months. Then the data becomes very big. In that sense, you can see big data being captured all the time, second by second, and then released to us so that we can begin released after the event, basically, so we can begin to think about how we can do things with it. Let me go through this very quickly to show you some ideas. That's actually transit in central London. The tube system, which you often see this abstracted tube map, is in the middle of there somewhere, but this is the rail system. It's not unlike Tokyo. You know, you go to Tokyo and you think, my goodness, this is an incredibly elaborate system. London is the same, but we're often just looking at the tube map when we're in London, but this is the railway map, right, including the tube. And of course, on top of that, we have the bus map, basically, and then we have ordinary transport and so on. So here's an example of this. Let's see if we can actually launch this movie and just show you an indication of what the tube train is. Okay, so we're going to see a movie of a brief movie of the London Tube, basically. I don't know what you can see there, but
I can come into King's Cross and then travel around. Change onto the Victoria line. What's the square?
I used to probably about once every 3 weeks.
We're now beginning to log transportation behavior using smart cards, essentially. We have a very large data set, which comes from the Oyster Card system, which is the swipe card that you charge up to travel on all public transport in central London.
We've been thinking of ways where we within TFL and our research partners can begin to.
Okay, I'd like to show you the rest of that movie basically, and of course I can show the PowerPoint afterwards, and you can get it basically. The hosts have it, but I really don't have enough time this afternoon to actually show it all. I'm very conscious that the time in that context. So the moderator, please tell me how much time I've got as we're heading towards the end. Basically. Okay,
you have 15 minutes.
10 minutes, very good. Okay, so we've been going about 20 minutes. Yeah, okay, very good. So I'm going to show you some pictures again about the data we get from this. I'm showing you in the next slide, basically, this is a little movie, basically. So I'll show you this running, and you'll get an idea of what this is. Now, I don't know whether you can see, but in the top right-hand corner of the movie, where the little CASA logo is, you've got a counter, and it's counting through. I'm not very clear on mine. I've got a few things across my PowerPoint here from that, but the little counter is telling you what day and what hour it is, basically, and you're seeing the peak, basically. So here we're on about Wednesday or Thursday. That's the morning peak, in a sense, you can see, and that's the evening peak, and then there's a late evening peak at that point. And we've got 5 days of this. This is synthetic data set put together over a 3-month day, give you a kind of an average, really, in a sense. And then we've got the weekends in the particular context. So we've probably come to the end of the movie at that point. Let me just start it off again so that you can actually follow it. So this is Sunday. We're on Sunday. That's the morning peak, I think, on Monday morning. And that's the evening peak. And then there's a late entertainment peak at the end of the day, basically, particularly in the big city, in the city areas, the workers go for drinks and so on, and go for dinner and that sense. So typically, this is a kind of a typical. Now, the key thing here is this is an energy map. This is people moving. It's an energy map of London. And we've got, think about the smart city as having many, many of these energy maps. We've got lots and lots of networks, basically. And the real issue is to actually make sense of all of this. Okay, let me move on in that sense. And this is some of the data we've got, the morning and evening. In that sense, you can see entries and exits, basically, all taken from the Oyster Card data. And then you can actually see how we've actually looked at in entries and exits, basically. That's a picture of the tube stations. We've just got the something like 400 tube stations, something like that, in the system in that particular context. But we have many, many more stations across London. And of course, we have bus stops. We can, the Oyster Card payment system is also used on buses. So we have a really very detailed and complex data set, or data sets, to deal with in this particular context. Let me move on. These are particularly tube stations. I like these examples. There are 4 tube stations here. That's the 24-hour picture of the tube stations. The tube station on the top right is, you can see these peaks, basically, where I'm pointing my mouth now. You see these massive peaks. This, in fact, is the Emirates, basically. This is the tube station at the Emirates where the Arsenal play, the Arsenal Football Club. And these are the 2 Saturday matches and then the midweek match, basically. So you can see the numbers of people. I don't have time to go into this, but these give you the profiles. It's a very rich data set that we've actually got in this particular context. So lots of things we can do with this data set. Here's an example where, for example, the circle line between Aldgate East and Paddington, basically, or Edgware Road, went down for about 4 hours on the 19th of July 2012, and we're able to capture the data from this line, basically. I should say that something like 1.23 million Oyster Card holders were affected by this over this 4-hour period. For a tube line to go around for 4 hours is really pretty unprecedented. It's a major disruption in that sense. And here you can actually see what we've done is to taken some of the data, and we're looking at increased travel time on the lines, because of course you get a disruption like this and it cascades across the network in that particular context. So here we've looked at it. We've also got data on the trains. This is not only the passengers, but the trains, basically. And these are the subway lines again, the different colors, basically. And this is the data on the trains, basically. This is the trains data. These are when the trains actually arrive. Now, it's speeded up, of course. One of the interesting things about this picture of these trains, that some of the trains don't look as though they're on the lines. If you look very closely, you see some of them fall off the lines. That's noise in the data. And because it's big data, we've got this stuff every second or so being produced and over a large area, basically. It's almost impossible to fix it. Once these trains go off the line, it's noise in the data in this particular context. So showing you it again, basically, you can see that at this point, the system resets at that point, basically. The sort of this is an old system, basically, to capture the trains, basically. And what we're interested in doing is matching the demand data from Oyster Card, the passenger data, with the trains data, because if you're disrupted on the train, we need to know what train you actually get on, basically, once you're in the system, basically, to actually measure the real disruption. Okay, let me move on. I'm very conscious we've got this for rail, tube, and bus stops, basically, so we can produce maps of the city in this sense, looking at that kind of thing. Let me move now to other sorts of media. This is the bike scheme. We have a public bike scheme in London, very well regimented by the Greater London Council in a sense. And it's mainly in the centre in that sense. So let's have a quick look. So yes, we've got a movie here basically showing you the London cycle hire. This is about 10 years old basically, but you're seeing basically, this is the centre of London, Westminster and the city and so on. This is the evening rush hour, and what you see there is the bikes are taken from inside of this sort of donut-shaped centre basically, and people ride them to the mainline railway stations where they pick up their train and take it out to the suburban locations, basically. So you can look at the morning rush hour and the evening rush hour in this particular context and see what the differences are. Let me move on in a sense, because a couple more things to show before I actually finish in this point. So let me stop at that point. Where am I? Let me get rid of, okay, back to the cycle hire. In that sense, the cycle hire map. Lots of information here. For example, if I actually click on Ollie O'Brien's web link there, basically, it'll take me to a much more updated map of the scheme. It's been changed dramatically over the years. It's much improved in that sense. Whoops, let me go on again. And these are the things we can actually get. We can actually build movies of how the bikes move, basically, and you can see an analysis over time, basically, of months and days in that sense of the bikes in this particular context. And here we've got other data, Twitter data. Many of you probably use social media, WeChat or WhatsApp or whatever it is, these sorts of things, or Twitter, basically. And of course, we can tag this data. This is giving us movement and so on. So let me just load the movie. We have a little movie here, I think, of this. Probably a little bit of sound. Okay, so I'm going to do it. This is London, basically. All of this, so you can just, we're talking about 30, 40 miles in this direction. So now we've put it on top of Google Earth, basically. Okay, so let's give you an idea of this, the Twitter cloud. Let me just move it on a little bit. Well, in fact, I don't think we've got time really in that sense, but it's giving you an idea of this context. And we can do this for different cities, looking at, the location of tweets, basically, giving you an idea of where people are during the day, basically. It's real-time streaming in that sense. So one of our colleagues has done this. And we can actually even disaggregate and look at languages for Twitter, which give us an indication of where different language groups relate in London. London is, like many big cities, fairly highly segregated in terms of the Japanese have an area around the original Japanese school from 50 years ago, basically, in West London. The French have an area and so on and so forth. And we can get this from Twitter data. And in that sense, I've just shown you a previous a previous picture here in that sense of where we've actually looked at the number of tweets associated with our 3D model, basically. So the vertical axis is not stories, basically, it's not heights of buildings, basically, it's heights of the number of tweets, basically. And if I were to show you this movie, which I don't have time, then you would actually see things like lots of people tweeting round about the big attractions, such as the British Museum and the House of Parliament and so on. Okay, so in other words, let me just round it off and say that I've given you a little bit of a taste of the real-time city, the smart city in that sense. We've not talked very much about what we do with this data, but clearly we can look at disruptions, we can look at improvement. We're increasingly thinking towards moving to autonomous vehicles. Our buildings are being sensed using energy sensors and so on. We're about to come up to the COP26 climate conference and so on. And a good deal of the future relating to our control of climate is actually going to be control of energy use in terms of the smart city and transport use in this particular context. Let me just say that we're talking about very rapid change now everywhere in that sense, that it's taken us by surprise almost, the emergence of the smart city. In that sense, we've now had these smart technologies for 20 years or more, but of course they're changing all the time. We now have platform economies. A lot of our capitalist systems and so on, our social and economic systems are being affected and impacted by new information technologies in that sense. And I'm sure that those will be talked about in terms of the meeting at that point. Let me thank a number of people in our group who've actually produced a lot of this media over the years, basically at that point. Let me also just finish with showing you a book, Urban Informatics, which has just come out, edited by a number of us. And it's open access. So if you go to this Springer thing, just key in Urban Informatics into Google or Bing or whatever, and you'll actually get a link to it, and it's freely downloadable. It's an open access book, and it deals with many of these different things related to the smart city and urban informatics. Okay, now I know that I'm over time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand on back to the moderator so that our second presenter can get going.
Thank you very much, Professor Michael Batty. Only 2 minutes, but that's okay. A very incredible presentation and also update related to the full of research in smart city related, especially the disruption mode from static to dynamic, and then from immobility to mobility, and then responding to the 4V phenomenon: velocity, veracity, volume, and verity. Thank you again, Professor Michael Batty, and give applause to Professor Michael Batty. And then I will move to the next, allow me to move to the second honorable presenter, Professor Jiro Kokuryo from Keio University. Professor Jiro.
May I start?
Yeah, please, the time is yours.
Thank you. May I have the right to share my screen?
Of course, please. The committee from Adiwidya help Professor Jiro by making him as a co-host. And you already as a co-host, Professor Jiro.
Great, thank you very much. Now you can see my screen, can you?
Yes, clearly.
You can. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Let me introduce myself again. My name is Jiro Kokuryo from Keio University, Japan. Please remember me as Jiro from Keio. That's easier to remember. I mean, it's a great pleasure for me to be able to address this group of people. I have not been able to return to Indonesia or particularly ITV for a few years, but Bandung is always one of the favorite places to visit, and I'm very happy to be able to talk with you. As my degree shows, which is DBA, which is Doctor of Business Administration, and MBA, Master of Business Administration, I am a business major, have been interested on issues around smart city from that context, but perhaps not particularly an expert on smart cities. But I hope to be able to bring a little bit different perspective, angle to the discussion from business background. Now, in that context, the first question I like to almost throw at you is, I know you are interested in smart city, but what do you want to accomplish by smart city? And I raise this because sometimes the goal, the objective, doesn't seem very clear when we discuss the issues of smart cities. And of course, on one hand, we are probably pursuing sort of a lot of convenience, like Professor Batty mentioned about autonomous driving too, and lots of different applications, digitally equipped cities, being able to manage convenient services for the citizens. And of course, we would like to pursue SDG. I think the terminology is familiar to all of you, but the sustainable goals, development goals, most notably carbon-free. Of course, the big urban areas in Asia, Tokyo is bad enough. I know Jakarta is pretty bad. And Bangkok is very bad. The pollution, air pollution created by with the economic growth, the consumption of carbon increasing, threatening the world environment. Of course, SDG includes other social goals as well. I have noted that equity is one of the important topic of this conference. Providing job opportunities for the less people with handicapped situations. All these and addressing the divide issues and the pollution and all those things we would like to pursue. I know these are very noble goals. Efficiency, of course, in all of this is another major topic we would like to address. Of course, digital technologies by really giving micro level demand and supply situation in various parts of the economy will have effect on reducing wastes, both on the supply side and the demand side, creating rooms to make the economy much more efficient than the present time. At a little abstract level, liberation from temporal and locational constraints. Of course, in COVID-19 situations, look at this. Professor Batty is, I don't know, is probably presenting from somewhere in the UK. I am presenting from Tokyo, Japan. And I know the audience seminar come from lots of different places in Indonesia. And it would have been impossible for me to come to Indonesia today because I had various things there yesterday, and we'll have something on Monday too. So, but of course, the information technologies have and in conjunction with COVID-19, which is really forcing us to do many things from home, really have changed our lives, liberated us from the temporal and locational constraints. I know that there are some other things that we have not been liberated. I mean, the temporal and locational constraints have not been removed. And the supply chain issues in Asia is really very serious. In our supermarkets, I mean, Japan imports a lot of chicken from Thailand and Vietnam. But because of the supply chain has been disrupted, there's actually shortage of chickens in our supermarket. So I mean, we are feeling that kind of effect in very serious ways. Reducing, I actually advise for a logistics company, which has been working very hard to reduce the number of contact points between, you know, in the physical distribution, people meet other people. But then we have found that the number of occasions that the people-to-people interaction is necessary is actually not when they transfer the physical good, but actually doing the paperwork, you know, handing the receipt and signing the receipt. All these things require person-to-person contact, and that and the actual person-to-person contact in physical distribution setting is actually not that many. So I understand that supply chain issues is very serious in Indonesia as well. So this remains the liberation of temporal and locational constraint will remain a major topic for at least a few more months. I hope it's only a few months and not longer. But that would be something that we would like to pursue. And of course, we can be a little bit more social, that this notion of participative society, where data is made available to a greater number of people. I mean, open data and the citizen science and the civic IT kinds of all these things will help avoid monopolization of data, but sharing of data, which will hopefully lead to a more participative society that's open to many people. But so coming back to the point, I mean, we know that we want all these kinds of things, but very often the discussion around smart city is confusing because we are talking. The grand vision of the direction of the society is not so clear. So here, as a person coming from social science or business end, I would like to promote the notions that we in the management of information systems area use a lot. The terminology is socio-technical systems. To really try to design not technology separately from society, and not society separate from technology, but really try to think of these as parts of integral social technical system that needs to be designed integrally to accomplish our social vision. And of course, in order to do that, we will need some key design parameters relevant to both, meaningful to both. To give you an example, let me touch upon something that's going on in Japan right now. Japan created what is called the digital agency that was launched on September 1, 2021. And I happen to be a member of the council, the policy steering council for this digital Japan's digital agency. Now the slogan of this digital agency is digitalization that leaves nobody left behind, and to be gentle to everyone. I guess there will be a lot of discussion around what that really means. And the following is not the Japanese government's official view, okay? So the following slide is my own interpretation of this digitalization that leaves nobody left behind, and to be gentle to everyone. So we need to really translate this social goal into technical requirements. And my interpretation of to leave nobody behind would be digital services that are customized to each individual. Now, for students that are like in their 20s or younger, may not be able to understand this, but for higher generation like myself, information technology meant very efficient processing of standardized service. And so the software was fairly rigid, was capable of very efficiently processing standardized process. So the image of IT for the older generation is that of standardized, efficient standardized service. But of course, in today's context, the agile information development, systems development, and the service-oriented software engineering really allows us to customize user experience to individual needs. And it is in that context we need to build a platform for secure data sharing. For example, when we take the example of autonomous driving, we have to collect all the information from other cars, and then have the system advise to you, or even provide you automatically a service that's customized, completely customized to your car. And that data includes a lot of personal information. So a platform for secure data sharing will become necessary. And the management of identity of people and things. I think Identity of people side, we have done a lot already, but what's on the horizon and which will become a huge issue in terms of things like cybersecurity is identity of things, where the other things that we are accessing authentic or not, or how can you authorize access to things only to people who should be authorized to. So authentication, authorization, identification, all of these things around things will become a major issue, and that would be a very big part of the smart city infrastructure that leaves nobody behind, meaning being able to provide customized service to each individual. And of course, we have lots of volcanoes. Indonesia and Japan shares the same situation of having volcanoes. We had a fairly big eruption just last week in one of our largest volcanoes. The damage wasn't that big, so it's not a big. And we know Indonesia has lots of volcanoes, and I understand you had the eruption fairly recently too. And Japan also. I mean, and we unfortunately we also shared tsunami. Of course, Japan did our efforts at the Aceh tsunami was quite catastrophic. We had our big tsunami, and to be able to create a resilient society that are able to mobilize resources flexibly and efficiently is something that's so we do need infrastructure that have these qualities in order to provide to be gentle to the people. So really, I'm just saying that the purpose of my saying this was to really try to the effort at trying to translate the social need into technical need, and really to try to simultaneously design our institutional and technological, socio-technical systems integrally. And as soon as we try to do this kind of things, we come to the realization that society is not a static system, that it actually society is a complex and dynamic system, and that evolves, and that experiences lots of unpredictable things. Plus, there are a few major forces at work that's changing the societal structure completely. I usually mention three elements. One important element is network externality of data, meaning network externality for these, probably this is not terminology that's not shared by many of you. It's an economics terminology, meaning that accumulation of things actually increases the value of things. That isolated data, value of an isolated piece of data is very small. But when another piece of data is added, it starts having value. And as the data accumulates more and more, the value of data increases exponentially. Even physical networks, if only one person had a smartphone, that's of very little value. And as the number of people that have these devices increase, the value rises exponentially. And there is the marginal cost of information is not actually zero, but almost negligible. Cost of copying information is very small. That's very different from physical goods that has very large marginal cost. And the important thing is that the market mechanism assumes positive marginal cost, and the economics theory says when the marginal cost and the sales price becomes the same, that the market reaches equilibrium, the balances. I mean, that's the reason why there's a lot of free goods on the internet. And then in the age of IoT, there's increasing traceability that eliminates the need for anonymous trade among strangers. And this has very profound meaning in the market economy. In the modern industrial economy, because the large production systems required a large market to justify the investment for the production infrastructure, really forced people to sell to anonymous mass, that you don't know who bought your product. And that's been the reason why things like exchange of money to your products was necessary. The notion of ownership and property right were the infrastructure to support this anonymous market. But that prerequisites for the society is now changing. So all these things forces at work to change the shape of economy, and we have to be mindful when we are building things like smart city. What would be the economics behind data sharing? Because that will be very different. I mean, in the physical products world, you would exchange physical product for money, and to envision a world in which data sharing becomes and sharing of goods, like the sharing economy, kinds of share bikes, share cars, all these things will be running on different economic principles than the last 150 years of our living in the market economy. And platforms will be managing these transactions and so forth. And in the end, we would like to accomplish sustainable economy where things are not wasted. And we meet the demand and supply in much more finer detail than we used to. So more recent, the more I think of this from business measures point of view, I think we are being asked to really go back to the foundations of the market economy, the philosophy and the market economy, and even the civilizational issues. So I term this as a new civilization requiring new governance philosophy, and really asking the question of Western modernity was based on individuality and human rights, and liberalism, democracy, economy based on ownership of property, data ownership restricting the use of. I mean, so when we apply the physical industrial economic principle, we have to perceive of data as privately owned, when there's a huge value in sharing of the data. So we probably need to go back to the fundamentals of fundamental philosophy behind the governance of data economy and data society. But of course, I'm not saying that all the privacy, I mean, it's okay to violate privacy, that the dignity of each individual person has to be honored. So how can we balance these different requirements? I mean, I hope not to offend technologists, but technically this is easy, just to share database and open access. That's technically easy, but it's really the building of the social governance structure that's being challenged. So more recently, I am studying the ethics of cyber civilization and perhaps revisiting the Asian philosophical legacies. Instead of honoring private ownership and individual rights, Asian norms have been more emphasizing more on benevolence and loyalty and trust to others, and conviviality with nature and all those things. I have running out of time to explain these kind of things in detail, and I apologize. I'm not competent enough about the Islamic value systems. I've been talking with Hindu people. I've been talking with the Islam people also about their. I presented this to the WIPO conference, and I got huge reaction that this is not just Asia, but this is Africa or South America. So I've been asked to include all these things, but I'm not competent enough to include all these things. But to really think from the foundations and then build infrastructure for these smart cities, really to bring happiness and well-being to all the people. I started 3 minutes late and I'm finishing 2 minutes late. So I think I'm good. So let me finish here. Thank you very much.
You were good. You end your presentation 2 minutes earlier, according to my watch. It's a great presentation from Professor Jiro, Kokuryo. So is it possible for me to share the screen, the committee? Also, I would like, is it possible for me to share a screen just to show some keywords from the two distinguished presenter, or if it's not possible, so we move on to the question and answer session. Please, if you would like would like to give question or comments to the presenter, and let me facilitate in this session. Maybe some of you or the committee or the attendants, other attendants or the students. Oh, there they are. There are two questions. The first one from the student from ITERA, Teknologi Sumatera, Tianu Futomo. This question to Professor Michael Batty. There are many institutions and data, but the public has some difficulty in accessing them. It takes a very long process to get the data, but there are several institutions that have gone towards being open source and accessible. How to integrate information from various institutions that have data and optimize it in the case of London so that the public knows the information from the required data. Other things that so that the public can know the data in real time, like in London, also real time planning, just like 24 hours updated information, just like in London case. Do you have any suggestion for us to fix this problem, and how long will it take for London to implement technology like Oyster Card? Because I admire the technological advances featured in your presentation. Thank you very much. The first turn, I would like give time for Professor Michael Batty to respond this question from Tian Nufutomo. Maybe Professor Michael Batty?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting question. As I'm sure you know, there's a lot of development of new data systems in many countries, basically, but many new geospatial data systems that are increasingly becoming available. And a lot of information which originally was private, even within government, is now moving into the public domain. So recently, let me just point to two examples recently. The London Data Hub, for example, is taking a whole variety of data, and this is organized by the Greater London Authority, taking a whole variety of data relating to housing, house prices, transportation, and so on, integrated with census data, etc., and is making that available in a kind of open source manner in that sense. So that's one initiative just in London, but there are many initiatives around the country like this. For example, in Scotland, the Scottish government have a lot of initiatives in developing uniform data sets, that integrating data and making them uniform in some way, and actually opening them up, turning them into open data for a variety of different people to use them in that sense. Another thing recently announced, in fact, a couple of days ago, is that the Ministry of Housing and Local Government in Britain have introduced just 10 different pilot projects about online public participation. And this is a major issue, of course, that online activity in terms of public participation has been growing quite rapidly in this sense. And that's another area where clearly the public are involved in planning and involved in planning data in that sense. So lots of initiatives like that. You asked the question about Oyster Card data. The Oyster Card data, a sample of Oyster Card data is available. If you go to the Transport for London website, you'll find that I think they release a week's worth of anonymized data so people can begin to experiment. In the same way I showed you some of the experiments we were doing, then you can get data, you can download data like that and look at it. What you can't get is a series of, you can't get 15 years worth of this data. And the reason for that is that Transport for London use this data to actually monitor the patronage of tube stations, basically. And this is a big political issue in the sense that if we can figure out that some tube stations are losing customers, others are gaining customers, this can be a big political issue related to, the government of London in this sense. Because clearly public transport is very highly subsidized in many countries basically, but certainly in London in that sense. So there are lots of initiatives going on in public data, open data, new data systems, new data infrastructures. I think we're going to see this for a while yet, that everywhere we'll be beginning to try to extract data and integrate it so that it's available and make it open in some sense. There are limits on this, privacy limits, of course, in that sense. But nevertheless, I think that in the UK and to some extent in the US too, and many European countries certainly. A lot of data that originally was closed is now being opened up by government. I'll stop at that point and hand back to our moderator.
Thank you very much, Professor Michael Batty. There are some keywords here. First thing is the idea of the condition in Indonesia. The second one is the capacity. The third one is the model. And then the next keywords is the following by the capability and the competency. There is a controversy, or we need to deal with not only technical things, but also with political things. Also, according to the reports of smart cities around the world and then textbooks during the 2000s and 2010s, it can be concluded that the process is very important in developing smart cities and the selection of the technology itself. Maybe that's the response for Tian Hutomo, the question for Professor Michael Batty. Thank you very much. The second one, same from Tian Hutomo from ITERA, but this time the question is for Professor Jiro. It is very interesting that your statement about the policy approach from social is more like the approach from technology. Indonesia has many tribes and there are 34 provinces with very diverse differences, but united with the same needs and as primary needs. How to realize these needs without any inequality between populations, like in Japan, where humans can advance their country to become a smart city? How long does it take to unify these thoughts so that people can realize a modern change today and can survive? Thank you very much. So I remember that before the pandemic occurred, there are some professor from Tokyo University develop a digital triplet concept, which is the important thing is that the identities and the cultures, local cultures, so on and so forth. Please, Professor Jiro.
Well, thank you very much for this interesting and very important question. Of course, as I mentioned in the slogan of digital agency, to leave nobody left behind, and gentle to everyone, really addresses the diversity issue and the divide issues. I think we need to be very mindful that I mean, the assessment of digitalization of economy in the last 20 years or so really makes us aware of dangers of divide actually deepening or widening instead of filling the gaps. So we need to be very conscious that the opportunities provided by information technology addresses everyone and to be inclusive at it. So, I mean, I'm not sure if we can be completely equal to everybody, but I think there are ways we can build smart cities so that everybody will have opportunities to benefit and actually do benefit. And it is very clear that we need, I mean, I mentioned only a few things, but like the infrastructure for authentication, authorization, these kind of things is an essential infrastructure for a smart city to build these more higher level applications that addresses each individual people. So we need combination of national governments providing these kinds of essential infrastructure combined with lots of different players, both public and private, addressing various needs of individual people that with diverse range of needs. So we really need that kind of a grand design for how to divide the work and then really to approach this in a structured way, so that we I mean this I think this will not happen automatically. We have to do this intentionally with a determination that this will come as. I think the terminology equity addresses this better than equality, but system with equity is something we need to consciously build. I hope I answered your question.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Jiro. There are some keywords that I can conclude from your response from the questions raised by a student from ITERA. The first thing is talking about how to share opportunities and benefits. Other thing is that every location unique. And then we need a system of equity, and then it is also important not for only in terms of technical things, but also there will be authority sharing from the different layers, from national to the local level. We can move on to the next question from Citawidya Ningrum from University of Lampung. Maybe both Professor Michael Batty and Professor Jiro could respond to this question. Is there any negative impact in using big data for smart city? If yes, how to minimize the negative impact? Maybe Professor Jiro and Professor Michael Batty can answer this question. The same thing happened in US. This is also the concern of the American Planning Association in 2017, when all data is provided online, so it deals with security. Please, maybe Professor Jiro first, then Professor Michael Batty.
Of course, I mean, we already, in terms of negative impact, we are already experiencing, privacy issues or fake news, and that kinds of negative things already. So these are all aware. When things like IoT penetrates, we probably need to be. This is still theoretical, hypothetical, but we should be mindful of the complex nature. I used the word in my presentation. We are talking about society is a complex and dynamic system that things the positive feedback loops creating catastrophic situation. We need to be mindful that connected worlds are sometimes unstable. So we need to be monitoring the behavior of the network and being able to intervene when things get out of hand. So there's a lot of things we don't know. I mean, there are some hints of what might happen already, and the social media is a good example of that. So we need to be mindful of that kind of behavior of complex system. is my answer to the first one. Am I supposed to address all these four or just this one?
Just first one, and then
Okay.
to Professor Michael Batty. Thank you, Professor Jiro. Professor Michael Batty.
Yeah, okay. This is a very important question. That a lot of data, which is being sensed in real time, is not really very suitable for many of the things that we're interested in planning cities. I say this because the reason for collecting the data in the first place is not to actually help us as planners, but to actually monitor the system. The reason why Transport for London use an automated system which collects data on where people move is not because they're particularly interested in where people move, just in actually efficient ways of payment, basically, in that sense, actually paying for the trip. And a lot of data is like this. In my little diagram, I showed information and control as being what we can do in planning to control the city. But the data that's coming out of the smart city, I called it information exhaust, meaning it's a bit like the sort of waste data, really, in some sense. And if it's suitable for us, then fine, right? But a lot of it isn't. Another good example is transportation data. Mobile phone calls, for example. This data is often being thought about now to replace or to help think about the movement of people in terms of trip patterns, basically. It's extremely expensive to collect transportation data, extremely expensive. The household interview surveys of 50 or 60 years ago that were done for transportation studies were very, very resource intensive and very expensive. Authorities are really not in a position where they can do that any longer. So consequently, mobile telephone calls are being used as a proxy, as a substitute, really. And it's very clear that a lot of that mobility data is very poor. It only really captures about 60% of transportation movements in that sense. So here are two examples of where the data itself, which is collected, is not really as suitable as we would like it to be in that sense. So it's negative in that way. In terms of social media data, then there are some really very important reservations about this. So, for example, it's very well known that older people do not use social media. In fact, I think, in fact, in one of the later questions here on the about older people and technical sophistication is noted. Basically, older people find it very difficult to interact with social media data. All at the level, really, of the fact they've not grown up with it in any sense. And let me give you an example. Older people, like myself and my wife, for example, find it very difficult to we never learned to type, for example. The Americans learn to type in high school. British people never learn to type, basically. They pick it up. And so they're not very good on mobile phones. As you get older, your fingers get a little bit sort of less flexible and so on. So there are lots of issues related to the use of new technologies in this sense. Which really is a negative impact. So consequently, Twitter data, you take Twitter data, it's dominated by young people. The same with Instagram data, possibly even Flickr data, which is photographs. So in some senses, to use that data to be representative is very problematic in that sense, and that so the representative of the nature of the data of the big data is very problematic. So there's some very big questions related to this whole question of the negative impacts of big data. How do we do something about it? Well, clearly we try and get better data. We also probably don't use certain sorts of data which are unrepresentative in that sense. That's why the census is such a good data source. It's a gold standard in Britain, the population census, but it's only 10 years. It's very expensive. Everybody gets sampled and so on. I'll stop at that point. It's a very big and important topic, this.
Thank you, Professor Michael Batty. And also I'm very excited for your answer and your work. Also, I cite your work about the evaluation of basic infrastructure in London during around 2013, 2017, directly from main source from you. And then other thing, the usage of mobility, mobile, like social media, which is for your information, also in Indonesia, it's already right now as SDI, One Data Indonesia or Satu Data Indonesia, which is already governed by Presidential Regulation 2019. And then I also did a small questionnaire about that. The same thing like the opinion of Professor Michael Batty is that their social media become popular, but some of those from academicians said that it is important for to take the most trust information, especially if those data we would like to use it for planning purpose. So we will move on to the three. I will read maybe for efficiency. I will read these three questions, the last three questions, and then I will let Professor Jiro and Professor Michael Batty to respond. From Pak Doni Christopher Sinaga from USU, how to change people thinking so that they can unite to build a smart city. The second one from Ibu Revia from Amicom. After reading the material from the presenter, my question is, what are the strategies or steps used to implement the smart city idea in Indonesia? Since Indonesia is wide and most of its territory is water consisting of various islands, the next question is how to spread the smart city idea to all people, just like Professor Batty already responded to this question, who don't understand this technological sophistication. The last one is from Nicola. This question is addressed to Mr. Jiro Kokuryo. Are there any tips for the Generation Z to help the Indonesian economy become more advanced so that it can become a developed country? Thank you very much. Maybe is it Professor Batty or Professor Jiro would like to respond this question? But I'm sure that Professor Batty is already respond some of the questions. Please, maybe.
Okay, let me just qualify. Yes, I said something about with respect to the representative nature of people being interested in smart city technologies and the problem with older people who have not grown up with these technologies. But the bigger question, I think, about smart city technologies, and I would urge people not to think of smart city technologies as being really anything different from technologies in general in terms of the city. That, in other words, the smart city technologies are everywhere in some sense. If you ask the question, what is the smartest city in the world? This question is often asked. There is no answer to that question because we're all using information technology. Everybody now is smart. If you have a smartphone, and I think about certainly half the world's population, that's about 4 billion people, have smartphones. Okay, doesn't necessarily mean they have very good internet access, but internet access is pretty good everywhere in those sorts of places, basically, where people have these phones. And basically, what that means is that we're all sort of involved in the smart city in some sense. We're all using information technologies to access websites, to look at maps and so on, to aid our daily lives in some sense. And so we're all using these technologies anyway. So in a sense, everywhere in Indonesia where people are using smartphones is part of the smart city in that sense. So what I would urge people to do is to not think of the smart city as being anything particularly different from the city in that sense. I know we make the distinction between both because we need to think about what's changing and so on. And that's useful from the point of view of our own personal and professional understanding. But generally speaking, smart city technologies are really everywhere in that sense. So let me just pull up the question again. Actually, I've lost the questions. They've gone from the sharing screen. That doesn't matter. I mean, so basically, you asked the question about smart cities and Indonesia and how you develop these ideas. Probably best to think of really a smart nation, really, or even smart citizens in that sense, rather than the smart city per se. So that would be one of my general responses to some of those later questions.
Thank you, Professor Michael Batty. Well, Professor Jiro, and after that, I will let Ibu Enda to talk about his question. Please wait, Ibu Enda, for please, Professor Jiro.
Yeah, let me be a little adventurous in my response. I may regret what I say from now, but let me say this anyway. I know Indonesia, for Indonesia, the geography, the lots of islands, you probably have like 5,000 islands or something like that, right? Has been a liability, and the complexity of, I mean, there are ethnic groups. I mean, how many dozens of ethnic groups? I mean, you've got lots, right? And that kind of diversity and the geographic situation tended to be a liability in the past. But the opportunity of information technology is to overcome and convert these kinds of liability into opportunities. That, I mean, here, let me challenge that we all think of cities as physical buildings on large piece of land, right? But today's information technology allows virtual cities that can beyond that kind of traditional barriers. Now, I am not saying that physical locations do not matter. I think, I mean, we've been in distance education for the last 18 months or so, and I mean, it's so nice to have students back on campus. Indonesia is still remote, right? But so we all appreciate the value of physical location. But I think the COVID-19 has forced us to really go beyond that barrier and really be able to design cities, societies that are free from traditional barriers. And I think Indonesia is in one of the best positions to take advantage of that, to remove traditional liabilities into opportunities. We know, being a maritime, I mean, that historically, Indonesia, I mean, people in the Pacific have been navigating. I mean, these national boundaries are really very artificial, right? And so a lot of trade among islands and open to the entire world. I mean, you are located at strategically I mean, not just in military sense, but in commercially, in a very strategic area of the world, when how many percentage of the world trade passes near you. So really try to be creative and not be stuck with the traditional presumptions about what things should be. I think we have a lot of opportunities to really revolutionize lots of things. And I think Indonesia is in good location.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Jiro. The time is very fast. So I will let Ibu Enda to give her question. Please, Ibu Enda, you can unmute. Maybe the committee, please unmute. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Ridwan. I'm Enda from Ministry of Public Works and now studying geomatics in ITB. My question for Professor Batty. As we know, geospatial is crucial in smart city, right? So Indonesia didn't have a 3D format standard for the highway. So I think it's crucial for smart city because it's if we say smart city, we also say interoperability. So how do you think about the significance of interoperability aspect involved in smart city, and how do London City share 3D data or model between stakeholders in a city? Thank you.
Okay, interoperability, as you know, is a general sort of notion in computing, which enables us to join different things together, which are developed in different places by different people in that sense. So it's really integrating information technologies in that sense, that we want, for example, one set of data to be able to communicate or link to another set of data. And one of the main interoperability features in cities really relates to spatial data, geographical data in some sense, GIS in that sense. So if you look at some of those areas, there's been a lot of effort to try and stitch together to make, as it were, data and software operable and linked, to add value really to some extent to data in terms of interoperability in this sense. It's a very important issue in terms of the smart city, because the presentation I gave introduced transit data, that's the subway data. I didn't talk about mobile phone data, but we've mentioned that. We've got social media data. And of course, as a basic background, I didn't talk at all about some of the major data sets that are useful from census and from housing and so on. There are lots of data sets now being collected on a continuing basis in that sense. All of these things need to be put together. We need to be able to integrate them in some sense to get the right sort of picture. And interoperability is often thought of in a general sense as being ways of actually building infrastructures that enable us to connect these things together. It's a very important issue, not just about smart cities, but about any data sets and software and ideas that develop in cities. You may ask the question, and we've not really touched on this, although Professor Jiro did say something about it in a sense. One of the key issues, of course, is that there's a lot of data that we use in planning, which is not quantitative and probably will not be automated in the senses we've been talking about. Is not big data, etc., but it's nevertheless to be very important. And I'm thinking about a lot of qualitative data. For example, in Britain at the present time, last year, there was a white paper produced by government for a new planning system. And the planning system was to be improved using digital technologies. There's been a lot of reaction against that because the idea that you could automate planning regulations or planning decisions, the idea that you have an algorithm that would be able to produce a planning decision for you for criteria is very problematic because many planners, rightly so, many politicians, many policy analysts consider that there are big qualitative issues involved in that. So that kind of automation is very problematic in that sense. So I think all of these things, I'm strayed a little bit from the interoperability question, but all of these things are really very important in terms of IT. And having said all of that related to planning, then you could ask all of those questions related to society in general and our use of information technologies in less planning orientated situations, really, related to our use of data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is already 3 p.m., so I will end this session, question and answer question. But let me conclude in general. Let me share a few things from the presentation of Professor Michael Batty. The model or some keywords talking about data, and then the real situation, real time, from static to dynamic, and then talking about transit in terms of London, intelligent and heterogeneity. And then in a discussion, it deals with the automation cities, some kind of major issues, urban issues, the things that related with science and computer, the usage of computer. And from Professor Jiro, from the model, it reveals that the design system is important. The objective of business, and then other things that the parameter is very important, but in the discussion, it leads to the marketing issues, learning from the digital agency from Japan, sharing autonomy, and then agencies, mechanism, products, and then digital traceability, and then market and models. Maybe that's the conclusion from me as a moderator. And before this session is ended, so let me allow me to inform that the committee of the Adiwidya 9 will give a symbolic certificate and placard to these two distinguished and honorable presenters, to Professor Michael Batty and to Professor Jiro Kokuryo. This is the symbolic certificate and placard for Professor Michael Batty. Thank you very much, Professor Michael Batty. And then I hope that this will end the discussion, and then we can continue to the research or other cooperation or collaboration. So give close to Professor Michael Batty. And then also a symbolic closing statement from Professor Michael Batty. Please, Professor Michael Batty, maybe a few things as a highlight.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed talking to you this morning. Sorry, this afternoon, I should say. It's 3 o'clock now in Indonesia. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very interested in what you're doing in ITB and generally in Indonesia in planning. I mean, I am aware of this. I was a professor in the 1980s. I was a professor at the University of Wales in Cardiff, basically. And we had some links. We had some links with Malaysia, and we did have some links occasionally, I think, with Bandung. And certainly at University College here, we've got quite strong links. I know a number of people have done their PhDs, I think, in UCL. and we're very anxious, I think, in CASA to try and cooperate, basically. We're very interested in plenary, one of the few units, I think, who basically work on computer models and things of that sort and data, and have a very strong planning orientation in the sense that we're part of the Bartlett, which is the Faculty of Architecture and Planning at UCL. And we think of a lot of what we do in terms of computers and data as being planning orientated. So we're very interested in cooperation in that sense. And this is one way, I think, of beginning to tell you what we're doing, and equally well, we're interested in what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you from Professor Michael Batty. And then there is also a warm regard from Professor Haryo Winarso, who also attend this webinar. The second distinguished, Professor Haryo.
Well, thank you very much for this wonderful opportunities to interact with the students and the faculty and other people from Indonesia. I could feel from the questions and the documents the passion that Indonesian people have on really improving the lives of people and advancing the equity of the people through information technology. And let me express my sincere respect for that passion. And I know there's a lot we can share, and the information technology really is providing us with this kind of opportunity to communicate very very flexibly. This is 5 p.m. in Tokyo, so we are in a bit better position to do this simultaneously than the UK. So I think I do really expect that information technology will bring us lots more opportunities to share views across borders. So I very much look forward to really exploring this new world together. So I thank you again for providing me this opportunity to interact, and very much look forward for future opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Professor Jiro Kokuryo. Give applause to Professor Jiro Kokuryo. And since Pak Haryo is here, Professor Haryo is here, and Pak Haryo is from UCL, and also ever been to Keio as an evaluator for our master program. So it is maybe some words from Professor Haryo to Professor Michael Batty and Professor Jiro Kokuryo. Please, Pak Haryo.
Yes. First of all, thank you very much for both Professor Kokuryo and Professor Batty. Yeah, I went to Keio, and we make a a double degree program with Keio University, but it is still going on. We are trying to have more actually. And for UCL, I was there in 2018 and met Professor Batty in CASA, and we were also trying to make a connection. I'm very happy that now Professor Batty is here, and perhaps we can start again, because I know that the late Muhtaram Karyo Edi was Professor Michael was the supervisor of the late Muhtaram Karyo Edi. That he is the supervisor of Pak Ridwan Sutriyadi here, so it's very long. I'm very happy to have this opportunity again to meet Professor Batty here. I think that's all, Pak Ridwan. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Haryo Winarso, and for your information, Professor Michael Batty. I'm an academic advisor for Zahratu Sabrina, if I'm not mistaken. She's working with you there in CASA. So I'm now bright student. Thank you very much, the committee, and I will hand this time and place to the community. Thank you very much, Adiwidya 9. Thank you.
Thank you
all. See you for the next webinar. Thank you. Salam.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jiro, Professor Michael Batty, and Mr. Ridwan Sutriadi, STMC PhD, for hosting such an insightful discussion. I hope this will be very beneficial for all the participants. Before Mr. Ridwan leaves this session, we also want to know your impression about the discussion today. Well, Mr. Ridwan, what do you think about this webinar and also the material?
This is very fruitful webinar, international webinar, because Professor Michael Batty has serial and then continuous research related with the smart city. And then other thing is that Keio University is the most prestigious university in Japan. I cannot, I still remember 10,000 yen. It used the founder of the SFC Keio, if I'm not mistaken. So the values of the Keios reflects in the 10,000 yen, which is the founder of the Keio University. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ridwan. So we move to the next agenda, which is gifting appreciation as a symbolic for Mr. Ridwan from all the committees for your availability to be our moderator for today. I hope today's session will be memorable for you and of course beneficial for all of us. Here's your certificate and placard that will be sent directly into your house as a parcel. Thank you, Mr. Ridwan. All right. Before we enter the webinar from national speakers, we will have a break session first, so all the participants can just stand by at the room until 15:20 to have a national prayer and anything else. Thank you and see you after the break. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. See you at 15:20 all.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Indonesia merupakan negara dengan ribuan pulau yang membentang dari Sabang sampai Merauke. Masyarakat yang tersebar dari berbagai macam suku, budaya, ras, dan agama memberikan warna yang majemuk dan multikultur bagi Ibu Pertiwi. Namun, kemajemukan ini ternyata tidak menjamin keselarasan dan keharmonisan bangsa. Faktanya, isu-isu keresahan masyarakat semakin lama semakin merajalela. Meningkatnya urbanisasi, padatnya arus lalu lintas sehingga kecelakaan sering terjadi. Limbah dan sampah berserakan di mana-mana. Kualitas pelayanan umum semakin menurun. Meningkatnya pengangguran, sulitnya pemerintah melakukan melakukan penataan ruang, ditambah pandemi COVID-19 yang semakin meluas, serta berbagai isu keresahan lain yang menyebabkan susah terciptanya integrasi sosial masyarakat Indonesia. Oleh karena itu, Kamil Pasca Sarjana ITB mempersembahkan Adiwidya 9 sebagai bentuk kepedulian terhadap krisisnya ide dan andil mahasiswa karena kurang meleknya mereka terhadap isu nasional dan permasalahan yang ada di Indonesia, serta minimnya semangat mahasiswa dalam mencetuskan gagasan serta solusi dari isu permasalahan di negara secara sistematis, metodologis, dan dapat dipertanggungjawabkan. Adiwidya 9 hadir dengan tema Smart City as an alternative solution for development and urban equity in Indonesia, merupakan serangkaian acara yang dikemas dalam bentuk talk show Smart Education, Smart Social Economy, dan Science Technology sebagai wadah guna menggali wawasan isu nasional dan solusinya, serta dalam bentuk webinar internasional sebagai sarana dalam mensinergikan peran mahasiswa dan menjaring solusi maupun gagasan penyelesaian permasalahan masyarakat guna mewujudkan pengembangan dan pemerataan kota di Indonesia. Sebagai kaum intelek muda, mahasiswa seharusnya lebih punya daya untuk memberikan gagasan serta solusi untuk menjadi bahan pertimbangan pemerintah dalam memutuskan suatu kebijakan. Untuk itu, kami manusia Allah ciptakan sebagai khalifah fil ardh untuk menjaga alam semesta. Kami hanya diperintahkan untuk bertawakal dan berikhtiar. Maka, inilah salah satu upaya kami dalam memberi solusi, mengutarakan gagasan pembangunan Smart City sebagai bentuk kepedulian kami terhadap negeri. Indonesia merupakan negara dengan ribuan pulau yang membentang dari Sabang sampai Merauke. Masyarakat yang tersebar dari berbagai macam suku, budaya, ras, dan agama memberikan warna yang majemuk dan multikultur bagi Ibu Pertiwi. Namun, kemajemukan ini ternyata tidak menjamin keselarasan dan keharmonisan bangsa. Faktanya, isu-isu keresahan masyarakat semakin lama semakin merajalela, meningkatnya urbanisasi, padatnya arus lalu lintas sehingga kecelakaan sering terjadi. Limbah dan sampah berserakan di mana-mana, kualitas pelayanan umum semakin menurun, meningkatnya pengangguran, sulitnya pemerintah melakukan penataan ruang, ditambah pandemi COVID-19 yang semakin meluas, serta berbagai isu keresahan lain yang menyebabkan susah terciptanya integrasi sosial masyarakat Indonesia. Oleh karena itu, Kamil Pasca Sarjana ITB mempersembahkan Adiwidya 9 sebagai bentuk kepedulian terhadap krisisnya ide dan andil mahasiswa karena kurang meleknya mereka terhadap isu nasional dan permasalahan yang ada di Indonesia, serta minimnya semangat mahasiswa dalam mencetuskan gagasan serta solusi dari isu permasalahan di negara secara sistematis, metodologis, dan dapat dipertanggungjawabkan. Adiwidya 9 hadir dengan tema Smart City as an Alternative Solution for Development and Urban Equity in Indonesia merupakan serangkaian acara yang dikemas dalam bentuk talk show Smart Education, Smart Social Economy, dan Science Technology sebagai wadah guna menggali wawasan isu nasional dan solusinya, serta dalam bentuk webinar internasional sebagai sarana dalam mensinergikan peran mahasiswa dan menjaring solusi maupun gagasan penyelesaian permasalahan masyarakat